Hello, everyone. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining our third online event. Today we have an interesting topic to discuss, but before we start, I would like to introduce our today's host, Willem Tromp, a Dutch AI researcher with 25 years of experience in project and resource management, MPM and business consultant, and a co-founder of Epic Flow and Glow Management. Hello, Willem.
Hi, Anastasia.
Mhm. And now, please meet our special guest, Ben Rawson, a British expert in the fields of project and resource management, change management, continuous improvement within a test and evaluation setting, and a defense and aerospace industry specialist. Hello, Ben.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to everybody.
Before we start, I just want to add that please feel free to ask and write your questions. And in the end of our conversation, our experts will answer you with pleasure. So let's start.
Thank you, Anastasia. Hello, everybody. Ben, I'm delighted to have you here. Do you
And I'm
remember,
delighted
Ben,
to be
that
here.
December 2019, we have met just for 5 minutes? Do you remember that? That was the
I,
start of
I,
a
rem-
long journey.
I remember the meeting very well, and it was the beginning of something great.
Yeah. You and your colleagues as a client and my team as being the supplier. We have a journey of 4 years. In the COVID time, I remember, and even after COVID time, we were lucky that we could travel and visit your colleagues in the UK. It was tremendous time. I'm happy that I can call you my friend. So, Ben, it's good to have you here. But, Ben, I will start with an extremely important question. Why is it important to have good resource management in a multi-project environment where resources work concurrently in several projects? So why?
Okay, so straight in at the deep end, then I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think it's really important to have a good approach to resource management within that complex multi-project environment, and today we're going to focus mainly on that. But clearly, there are lots of other applications for resource management in other settings. But today, let's focus on the multi-project environment. And for me, there are two main reasons. But first and foremost, it's all about the quality of the output and ensuring that we're able to deliver the quality of the output that we set out to achieve. And more often than not, the quality is entirely dependent upon having the right person or the right team at that point in time to deliver what it is that's been planned to deliver to the standard that we've set ourselves. So there are two main factors to that. To put it in broad terms, clearly from a team or an individual's perspective, you need to have somebody that's got the right skills to be able to go and deliver that task or a network of tasks, and then also the availability. So not only are they the right person with the right skills, but are they available at the right point in time, or roughly the right point in time that you envisage that you need to deliver that.
Okay.
So,
Yeah,
although sorry,
no, go ahead, Ben.
I think although it's great having that right person or team, have to ensure that we avoid exceeding the capacity within that individual resources availability or within the team's availability, and the direct knock-on of exceeding that capacity and actually creating a bottleneck type scenario is that it will impact the flow of the project, the speed of delivery of the project itself. And I think just to draw an example on that, if you were to have maybe a bottleneck resource with two or more tasks on their desk, and a priority decision is required as to which task or project they're going to be working on, the impact of that decision will have a direct impact on the other projects where that resource or person or team have maybe set a couple of tasks aside and focused on the main priority, and that in turn causes waiting times within other projects. starts impacting on other resource groups that are waiting for maybe downstream tasks within that network. There are lots of things going on within that complex multi-project environment, which to the importance of why resource management is so important.
So sorry to interrupt, but in a summary, you can say finding the right person, which is a quality aspect, and also the right team. And the second thing is make sure that the people are available, that they have the capacity to perform the job. So that's basically, in summary, the why.
Skills and availability, they're the two main things.
Yeah, but Ben, how do you organize this? Because it's an easy story, but I think organizing is a little bit more complex. Can you tell me how you did this in your last few implementations you had? And I know you really delivered. We learned a lot from you. So please share it with the people in the same webinar. How?
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it in terms of how simple it sounds in theory, but in practice it's somewhat different in that ever changing landscape. So first of all, you need to find the right person to undertake that whatever that activity is. But in order to do that, take it back a step. You need to understand what the requirement is. What is the content of that task or network? And there are a number of things there to consider. I think the easy one is, what is the type of role that I need to go and undertake that task? You know, we can talk about it in the most simplistic form in terms of a role or a high level skill, and whether that's a mechanical engineer, a systems engineer, some sort of chemical scientist, you know, that sort of level. But in a lot of cases, that's just not enough to describe what it is that we actually want to go and undertake. So the introduction of using competencies and competencies or skills, maybe with the factor of attainment levels within that as well, to start building out, you know, what is it specifically that I want my mechanical engineer as part of this task or otherwise to undertake. And there's a great system available, or there's a lot of work been done in this field by Dreyfus and Dreyfus, I think, is the model. And we can start looking at a competency map and attainment levels within competencies, etc. And you can really start to understand what are the skills of people and the competencies that they possess, but then equally, what does the demand look like? And you've got to find the right level of balance in terms of the demand profile as to what the organization requires. You clearly don't want to be planning at too much detail.
Ben, do you have an example of a role, and within this role, competencies?
Yeah, certainly. So if we go back to mechanical engineer, so maybe you've got 2D or 3D design within that that typically are competencies that would be possessed by certain mechanical engineers, but noting as well that those individual competencies could be possessed in the wider resource pool, not necessarily mapping to the resources straight into the mechanical engineering group. So it's understanding what is my landscape in terms of competency profiles across the organization.
But this raises a question. Can it happen that people have competencies without being part of one group?
Yeah, absolutely. So people as they in a lot of cases, as they progress through their careers, they may jump into an entirely different discipline, but that doesn't mean that they've forgotten all of those skills and competencies that maybe they possessed in a previous role. So it's important to factor all of those in, because they can really help us downstream with overcoming some of those bottleneck scenarios in terms of who has the appropriate skills and competencies to help me, rather than go for the default. Let's increase the size of our resource pool in these bottleneck areas.
Ben, you mentioned Dreyfus and Dreyfus. This model, which is going from a novice to aspirant, I think advanced, proficient to expert. So this 5 steps model is also part of the attainment levels, correct?
Exactly that.
Okay,
so
good. So now we have competences. So we have a role, primary role, and we have competences. And the primary role of mechanical engineer, and 2D design and 3D design. Okay. Do you have more things for good, what you need, the how for good resource management?
Yeah, I think so. So I like to call them attributes. And this is a discussion that we've developed over and also in terms of how you would approach this in many respects over the last few years. But some of those attributes that an individual would possess, such as it may be their geographic location in the world. Now that we're moving to a much more sort of agile, digital type workplace where we can operate remotely. So having an indication as to where people are placed in the world, or maybe it's client experience. So it maybe where resources have had experience of working with specific clients and understand their needs in a little bit more detail. So all of these additional attributes help to build quite a rich picture in terms of the skills, competencies, and attributes available to us within a resource management capacity.
Okay, so you have two parts. You have, let's say, the supply part. Then you talk about competencies for a specific person with his attributes, and you have the demand part.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Who's responsible for the demand?
So I think the demand originator, whether that's the project manager working hand in hand with maybe a technical lead, somebody that might understand what the actual requirements of the specification are. But I think in terms of the early stage, before you then go and constrain your plan around resource availability, you need to build that out in terms of park the individuals required and start describing what are the roles, what are the skills, the attributes, competencies, all that. That's what you need from the outset, and then to be able to constrain that plan within the wider portfolio to create, I suppose, ultimately your schedule. So you're looking at realistic start and end dates, not on what's feasible within the project plan in isolation, but what's feasible within that plan in and around the entire portfolio.
Okay, yeah, that's multi-project, eh?
That is
portfolio.
Definition of multi-project management.
So basically, portfolio management is also resource management.
They are intrinsically linked, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, any items more on how to do that, Ben?
Yeah, I think so. So moving away from the actual resource pool itself now, and diving into some of the additional detail, I think you have to ensure that that people and resource groups don't get overloaded, because the advent of overloading resources and or bottlenecks give rise to some pretty unwanted results. And actually, we've prepared a few slides to maybe demonstrate the vicious circle of resource overload. So it'd be great to take a look at those, I think.
Yeah, but before we do that, so we have the demand and the supply, and all those items, entities, you can match demand and supply, but then still you can overload people. That's basically what you say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, good.
So unless you're constantly monitoring your overload, underload scenarios within your resource groups, as well as planning your project in a way that are delivering. The two things are intrinsically linked. You need to look at both sides of the coin as part of that resource management / portfolio management.
Yeah. So you need to have this matching tool, matching demands.
Yeah, exactly that.
Shall I go to the slides we prepared regarding the overload situation, Ben?
Why not? Let's take a look.
Okay. I'm ready, Ben.
Okay, perfect. So this vicious circle of resource overload then, and let's take a look at it, and then we'll maybe focus on how we can break this. So to start with, we have resources getting overloaded. So that's our start point for this topic. Now, in a lot of cases, the default go-to is overtime in the short term. So it's how do we deal with this overload here and now? We're running late. We haven't got enough capacity within resource pool. Let's engage in a bit of overtime. But that's a short-term option. I think if you look to that as a long-term solution, you very quickly move into fatigue within the resource pool, and of course, fatigue then leads to mistakes. And mistakes clearly have the impact of rework being required, which in turn can actually impact your overload scenario as that rework takes place. So that's a look at the individual resources perspective and how much of an impact it can have there. And we'll just pause there quickly and take a look at what it means for the project itself. Then, so the instance where resources are overloaded, that actually increases the waiting time, not just within the maybe the project that the resources are working on, but the projects that are now being delayed as a result of the overload of the resources having to make those priority decisions to work on project A, project B, project C, tasks, etc. So waiting time across the portfolio starts to increase quite dramatically in some cases, and individual projects themselves face delays. And we've all been in the position where you're working on a project that's running late, and you have quite a bit of focus on you from the project management community, the PM specifically. So maybe you might start getting a project manager complaining with very good reason. But if you bring all of that back in, what that means with the rework and the project manager starting to escalate things locally within that project is that multitasking within that portfolio starts becoming more prevalent with the ambition of pleasing all project managers all of the time, which we know if you start out with that overload to start with, it's almost an impossible cycle to get out of if we continue in this way. So very quickly, productivity starts to drop pretty rapidly, and then we start seeing this in maybe it's our data, our KPIs, all of that pressure that is accumulated ultimately results in stress, and this is not a good combination for people, and that can ultimately lead to the worst possible scenario in this instance of illness or burnout, and nobody wants to see that. And of course, as soon as you've entered that scenario, the resource pool itself then becomes depleted, where people leave through illness or stress, or maybe people start looking at other options in the workplace for them. And before you know it, you're back on the loop again. But if you continue that loop too many times, I think there is a good chance that customers will start to be impacted, and they will complain as a result of that, and then equally reputation starts to drop off somewhat, and over time that can impact on repeat work, and before you know it, it's no longer a resource issue, but it's actually a demand issue. We're not seeing as much demand as maybe we used to see.
How to get out of this, Ben?
So there are there's one obvious option here. I think if you focus on the overload, the right at the very top where we started out, focus on the overload and try to eliminate the overload, and then enter into this cycle, but not as a one-off. It's a continuous monitoring exercise. So it's always watching for overload scenarios, and not just in the here and now in the tactical phase, but also what's happening maybe in 3, 6, 9 months time, maybe even just over the horizon. So we've always got that visibility of where we need to react to those overload scenarios, but with the right system and approach ahead of time to allow you to do something about it as a leadership community, so that the impact to the resources that are executing the tasks and working on the projects aren't impacted as much by that. Clearly, you'll have risks that are realised, or things will happen again. So.
Hey Ben, so you talk about you have to make sure that nobody gets overloaded in the planning phase, like where you do your portfolio management, but you also have to do it during execution. Is that correct?
Absolutely. It's not a one-time exercise. So from that initial the commitment of engaging in a project and starting it off, yes, you clearly undertake the capacity check there and avoid bottlenecks, but I think you also need to monitor. So every time a new project is added, maybe a risk is realised, all of those issues, and that risk can be either demand or supply orientated. So it's a constant action to review that overload data.
Okay. And are there more ways to break the circle?
Yeah, I think I not necessarily break, but certainly complement the resource overload. I think the removal of all bad multitasking is a good way to go about things too. Okay. That can help. So of all the touch points within this high level slide deck, I would look towards resource overload and the removal of bad multitasking.
Okay. Shall I dive into this bad multitasking subject now, Ben?
I think so. You are the seasoned experts in this field. Yeah, Willem.
Okay, then I will take this part, and then we go back to the how, because we didn't finish the how yet.
Not yet. There's just one more thing that I think is.
We will do that. We will do that after.
Yeah. We'll touch on that shortly.
Good. Okay, let me continue with the. Okay. Bad multitasking. What is, in our view, bad multitasking? Now, suppose we have a plan, and one resource is working on a task of project 1, and then he has to go to a task on project 2, and at last doing a task in project 3. They are working in a multi-project environment. And what we see is between the tasks we have setup times, which is quite normal. But if we look at the execution, what multitasking is, that they start with the task in project 1, do not finish it, then jump over to a task in project 2, do not finish it, then go to a task in project 3, and also do not finish it. And then they go back to task number 1. Now, etc. So in order to please the PMs, they just do a part of a task and say, oh, I already have a progress of 34%. But it looks like that the question is, what is causing the damage? And I hear a lot, it's the extra setup time. And this is not true. The real damage is caused by significant extension of the lead time and not by the extra setups. And we can show it to you, because the planned finish of the task in project 1 was here, but in the execution, you see it's almost at the end. For task 2, of course, this is different. But basically, if you do multitasking, you have 3 aspects. You lose productivity because of extra setups. And the second one is you really extend the duration of task, finishing the task. Okay, Ben, I leave it to here. I will switch off the presentation, and then we can go back to the how, because you did not finish the how yet. So please enlighten us.
Okay, thanks. So I think at the very end of all of that, we've talked about the right resources, we've talked about some overload and eliminating bad resource. I think what's key is what's happening in the rearview mirror as well. So how have we performed in terms of delivering against what we plan to deliver? And so it's all about monitoring the output. And I think this is really important, because you need to understand how much work your resources or resource groups can deliver against that planned load, as it will help to inform maybe future planning decisions in terms of the estimates and refining them. It may indicate that actually we've got a bit of a problem in certain areas that we can dive into and understand a little bit more about what's going on. And it may be, maybe the equipment that people are working with isn't quite up to standard, or maybe the instructions that they're receiving aren't coming through clear enough, whatever it happens to be. But there are normally good reasons as to why the output isn't quite at the level that we planned to achieve.
Ben, the second, what is output?
So in terms of what we the work done versus the planned work, I suppose. So the task.
Okay. So you say I have a deliverable. Let's say I have to make a drawing.
Yeah.
And then you have the estimation versus the spent hours. And output, what is output in this case?
So the output would be the drawing.
The drawing. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I mean, there's another rabbit hole to dive down into in terms of the hours that have been consumed whilst delivering that task, and whether it was more or less than what we originally set out to achieve. And that's where you can start diving into, have we been more efficient than we thought in our delivery, or actually have we exceeded the budget, and maybe that again informs future planning decisions. So that's a very different topic.
Yeah. If you talk about output, you have how many hours did I spend? But you also have duration, because if you multitask, you remember the multitasking, you extend the duration. So it has 2 aspects.
Yeah, absolutely. And that just brings us back to the, I suppose, the waiting times and the reduced flow within the projects themselves as a result of that. So you've got to be really careful as to strike the right balance in that.
Okay. So the how is you have to monitor this.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
How we performed.
And more aspects for the how?
I think you've exhausted me there for this discussion, Jan. Willem, otherwise we're going to run out of time.
Hey, but Ben, in order to do that, what do you need to do that?
I can tell you what
do
we
you
don't
need?
need.
Sorry?
I can tell you what we don't need, and that's a spreadsheet to manage all of this.
Continue.
So we really need a software system that can support everything that we've just discussed in a way that's not going to become overbearing and create an administrative burden on our already sort of highly demanded resources. So ideally, that would be a system that would interface with other systems within an organization, and whether that's tapping into HR systems to go and fetch information about people's skills, competencies, their availability, when have they booked 2 weeks off to go away on holiday. Probably best not to assign tasks for a month in that period, if they're only available for 2 weeks in the month, I should say. And then also looking at an interface with however you create your demand. So whether that's using Gantt charts through Microsoft Project or through Jira, but being able to bring in all of that demand itself. Once you've ascertained that, I think the next question is whether you're looking for a system that plans in a deterministic way, so overlaying multiple Gantt charts on top of each other and trying to plan what's happening on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, etc., or if you're looking for something that's much more dynamic in its approach and able to handle those changes within the environment that is the multi-project management, fast-paced, ever-changing scenario. So I think my personal preference in that respect has always been to shift towards a dynamic planning approach that's able to react and, more importantly, provide meaningful information to the user community as to what's going on.
Hey, but Ben, if I look at project management systems, in my view, most of them are very deterministic, as if they can plan the start and end date of all the activities, all the tasks. So you say, no, that's not going to work in a multi-project management environment. You need to have a dynamic planning system.
I think if you want to be in a position where you're not spending a huge amount of overhead managing those systems and trying to plan at that level of detail and in that deterministic way, then yes, I think dynamic route is a better approach.
Okay, clear. So okay, that was the system. Okay, now Ben, we are now working together for 4 years. I have a lot of experience in it. I think a subject, what are the kind of mistakes we can make? Now, we have prepared this, but I would like you to emphasize, I will open the presentation again. What are common mistakes in a multi-project environment? And Ben, the floor is yours. I will open the first one. Good, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, perfect. So I think looking at utilization in isolation across a whole company within your resource pool is it can have unwanted consequences. So, for example, high utilization in those bottleneck resources is a really good thing to achieve in terms of you want to ensure that those bottlenecks bottleneck groups are constantly working on those outputs and the work. There's a continual flow in, because the last thing you want within a bottleneck resource group is for work not to be ready to start, so to speak. But then equally, it would be a bit of a warning sign that if you see high utilization in maybe one of those resource groups with low demand, that would indicate a bit of an issue there in terms of what's going on, and maybe that's something that you would want to dive into. So I think utilization across the whole company in isolation can start creating maybe unwanted, whether it's behaviors or metrics that otherwise would drive inefficiency in some cases. So that's the first one.
But that's interesting. You say if utilization is your KPI, you run the risk that people change their behavior just to fulfill the utilization level. Okay, that's interesting. But How can you increase the utilization of the whole company when you know I have a bottleneck?
So I think in terms of increasing utilization across the whole company on average, with the bottleneck, it's all about enabling that bottleneck. So maximizing the flow of work through that bottleneck resource, which in turn will flow through to other resources that maybe aren't quite as highly demanded, but they'll have that flow of work, maximum work on their desk that's ready to start. And in turn, that will organically introduce an increase in utilization versus the demand. So it's all about applying grease to the wheels of those bottleneck resource groups, which in turn, if you focus on that, that will start improving across the wider resource pool.
Yeah, we all know that the theory of constraints from Eli Goldratt is focusing on that. Increase the output of the bottleneck, and automatically the non-bottlenecks will get a higher utilization in case you have demand. Okay, good. Ben, shall we go to the second one?
Yes, absolutely. So I think secondly here we've got the assigning of people or resources in general to projects on specific days. So maybe if you've got a person that you're going to assign to project A on Monday, project B on Tuesday, etc. And this is an approach that actually can introduce reduce the flow of projects again, in that if, for example, you have a 5-day task that you want somebody to undertake and they've only been assigned to that project for 1 day a week, then in essence that will take 5 weeks by virtue of them only being available for the 1 day a week. So if that task happens to be on your critical path, before you know it, you've just introduced a huge amount of delay to that project.
It's a good one, Ben, because I see this almost everywhere. Resource managers think that if I organize in this way, all the PMs are pleased, but in the end, they just introduce waiting time. Correct?
Yeah, and what you've done is you've reserved capacity for a project rather than looking at assigning the right people to the right tasks in order to meet the obligations of the entire portfolio. So yeah.
Good. Let's go to the third one.
Yes, why not? So micromanagement. I think planning, and what I mean by this is planning at too low a level. So I think this is a mistake that a lot of people make. I've made it myself on my journey through life, and I think that the best people to plan at that tactical level of detail are always going to be those experts that are so involved with the day-to-day delivery. So I think it's finding the right level of planning approach, so that it captures the needs of the project itself, but then equally doesn't create this environment of micromanagement, which actually increases the amount of administrative effort required to run any resource management system.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you. Let's go to number 4. 1 second. I pushed the wrong button. Yeah. Go ahead, Ben.
Yes. So the whole booking progress against whether it's a project or whatever it happens to be. In a lot of cases, a lot of organisations, this can be interpreted as maybe a timesheet being entered, which isn't always linked to what's going on in reality. But in a lot of cases, that's seen as being an administrative task, and most people would be right in that respect. But if you look at it through a slightly different lens, in terms of updating progress is a form of communication. So actually, not only am I communicating the progress against the tasks that I have been assigned or whatever it is that I'm working on, but I'm communicating to my colleagues, to my peers, not only within the project management community, but also downstream of that network of tasks, in terms of my progress on what I'm working on, and it starts to allow them to ready themselves for when their task is ready to start, and it gives people that forward visibility of the wider landscape. So I think booking timesheets, if you link timesheet systems in with a good planning tool, you can use it as a form of communication, and at that point maybe you'd want to increase the frequency of reporting progress and communicating but not through the lens of an administrative tool that we use for booking timesheets, etc.
Ben, I quite often I hear the complaint the following. I'm doing my bookings at the end of the week, Friday afternoon, because that's more efficient. What you are telling, that's not efficient at all, because you block communication for a whole week.
Yeah, exactly. So if I've just finished off my 5-day task on the Monday, so I'm finishing off from the previous week, and hypothetically there's another task that runs on for another 5 days beyond that, and I choose to communicate that I've completed that at the end of the week, I've just introduced 4 days of waiting time within that project. And again, if I'm on a critical path, that's 4 days of my buffer that I have just consumed.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you for that. Shall we go to the next one?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, working on too many tasks concurrently. This is the bad multitasking that you touched on and covered so well, Willem. So I don't plan to dwell too much on this one, but important to.
But Ben,
do this.
Is there also good multitasking?
I am sure that there is good multitasking. So maybe an example of good multitasking would be that if my highest priority task is not ready to start, let's say, and maybe there's a lower priority task that I can start, I might choose to work on the lower priority task, but then as soon as the higher priority becomes available, I would drop the lower priority and jump onto the higher priority. Yeah. That would be an example of where good multitasking exists, but you need to be informed as to what sort of an impact will that decision have, not only on my task immediately, but on both project and the wider portfolio. Because when you start looking at consequence, the human mind can't fathom the impact of that. So again, that comes back to having a resource management system that could do that.
So basically, we didn't discuss it yet, but prioritization of tasks should be a part of this of the how. How do we organize? So resource management is also to do with the prioritization of tasks. What to do first, second, and third.
I think so. Yeah, maybe that's one that I should have covered off earlier on, but I totally agree. In that complex landscape, maybe if I'm a mechanical engineer in a design office and I've got 7 or 8 projects that are all calling for my time to design widgets or whatever it happens to be, some form of indication as to a calculated priority. Yes, there's always going to be local priorities in terms of local importance and how that's the role of maybe the program manager to interpret that. But to remove the subjective decision from that individual, certainly give them data to make an informed decision. I think prioritizing those tasks in a way that will tell you the impact on the overall program of works is advantageous, to say the least.
Okay, clear. I think we have a last one left. Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, exactly this. So that hiding the time and capacity buffers within task estimations themselves. So maybe that might be the addition of some form of risk budget that has been maybe determined by the local resources themselves that maybe have been asked to estimate how long a certain task or suite of tasks would take. And I think as soon as you start introducing some of that time and capacity buffer within those tasks for maybe a project that we're going to go work on in 6 months' time, fast forward to that when we're actually working on it, we've contracted it, we've committed to it, it's in our backlog. We often fall into the trap of having that task on our desk, seeing how much what the estimate was, and we would work within that estimate. So this gives rise to Parkinson's law in terms of filling the available time to deliver the task. And if we've folded some of that into the original estimate, it's more than likely that most of that will be consumed through the task itself.
Okay.
And where you have it's realised, then you more often than not overshoot that further.
Hey, but Ben, we know we need buffers for the common and
Yeah.
known uncertainty. So where should you put the time and the capacity buffers? Do you have an idea on that?
So I think in terms of the time and capacity buffers, the time buffer on your critical path, you should be looking at beyond the end of that to your delivery milestone. So this creates buffer at the end of the project, so that if and when tasks are delayed or risks are realised, whatever the reason is, you consume from a project buffer rather than individual task buffers.
Okay. And the capacity buffer, where should you put that?
So the capacity buffer, you could have that either as a lower priority task that's held almost as like a risk budget, I suppose, but that would be formulated based on probability and the impact of those risks manifesting. So, but you wouldn't embed them within the tasks themselves. You would hold that separately.
But if you can choose to put the capacity buffer, you can choose to put it on the portfolio level, or you can put it on project level. What would you prefer?
I don't think there's a one size fits all, if I'm being honest with you, Willem. I think it's entirely dependent. Yeah.
Okay, good. Ben, we have discussed the things we discussed before. We planned before. So I'm going to ask Anastasia to start with the questions. Can you do that, Anastasia? Thank you, Ben. We have now 20 minutes left for question answering. Okay, the question is, how can AI help with resource management? Now, the interesting thing is that there was a person who submitted for this webinar, and he already asked this question last week. So I took the liberty to prepare this question. And therefore, I have a very few slides, and then we can go through it, because we are also working in the AI area. 1 second. How can AI help resource management? And what we think is that we can do predictive analytics based on all kind of things, which is business value, which is also the availability of people, like Ben explained, with their competencies and their attributes, and also use past experience about what is the difference between estimations and actual. So that's an AI component which we can use in the resource management. A second one, and that's a very interesting one, because we can do automatic resource assignment based on competencies, like you described, Ben, attributes, experience in the past, and other characteristics such as known clients, so that you say that I want to have somebody who is already acquainted with this client. That's automatic resource assignment. The third one is virtual assistant based on triggers and signals that warn users on things that are happening, like budget overrun. And in case of resources, that the resource manager gets a signal, look out, Ben Rawson is overloaded, give him a call and try to figure out what is happening and help this person. Another example, and that's the last example, a virtual assistant can answer questions based on project and resource data, wiki data, which is our manual, and training data, etc. And for resources, we use it in case of, can I have a day off next week? And then the system will answer, the AI components will answer, you have a very low load on Wednesday. So yes, you can, but please choose the Wednesday. So just as an example, a few examples. I will remove this. Anastasia, second question, please. And then Ben can answer, or both of us, Ben. Will the role of the resource manager change when this concept is implemented? Ben, you have this experience probably.
I do, and I suppose clearly it depends on the role of the resource manager before the change or a new system is implemented, a different approach. But if we take maybe an example where a resource manager is currently responsible for finding the right person or team, and we're allocating them to tasks or projects, and then moving on, maybe monitoring capacity as well. Sorry, I should have said. But if we move towards an approach where a lot of this is much more simplistic, and maybe with the advent of AI, as Jan Willem just mentioned there, that creates the opportunity to simplify a lot of those more repetitive processes that are administrative and system driven, and it actually then allows the resource manager that time, I suppose, to maybe understand the resources that they're responsible for in a bit more detail, get to know them as people, help them in terms of what are the opportunities within the pipeline that may help them to develop their career or further their career progressions. So there are lots of things over and above the default matching of resource to demand and checking for capacity, etc., that the resource manager, I think, could use the system for, and it could be immensely powerful in many respects.
I remember, Ben, in the organization, you were the client and we were the supplier, that there was a remark from one of your resource managers that he said, "Oh, I don't have work anymore." And during this discussion, we said, "Now you can do things you never had time before."
Yeah,
And that's
exactly
exactly the story you just told. Yeah, excellent. Okay, thank you, Ben. Anastasia, third question, please. How do you foster collaboration, communication, and trust among stakeholders and team members in resource management processes? Ben, it's a long question.
Yeah, it is. So I think it all comes down to working with that community in terms of the journey itself. What is the start point? Working out where the community wants to get to, and then working with them to develop that plan, that plan of action to change, to ensure that relationship is built and that trust is built, and then ultimately that we all get to the point in the future where we want to get to. So I think it's very much a collaborative process. So it's not just looking at how we structure our data, how we use a system to arrive at that point, but it's also the human aspect and the way that we take people along that journey and actually help build that journey with us. That's the most key aspect in all of this, I think.
Ben, I just realized you can look from an individual to his or her career perspective, but from a company point of view, you can have a look at changing. The market is changing, so we need different competencies. We need new competencies. So I think this is a good example of this, which is related to this question, that you have more stakeholders, and good resource management can really help you in doing that. Yeah. Okay, good. That's it. Okay, Anastasia, next question, please. We have a lot of time. Great. What are the best practices and tools for resource allocation, scheduling, monitoring, and reporting in multi-project settings? Oh, this is a dangerous question, Ben. I forgot to tell, maybe I should tell that. Maybe it's not known, but Ben joined Epic Flow last month, Ben, after finishing your implementation at this company. So he's now part of the Epic Flow family. So if Ben is going to answer this question, you should be aware that he's biased.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that I can answer this question in a way that is unbiased. But my experience with Epic Flow as a system is that it's highly tailorable. The number of scenarios that you can configure the system in, and the way that you can plan or build a resource pool are practically infinite. And I think the important thing to consider in all of this is that it's all about understanding the as-is within any organization that's looking at going through that change, looking at the to-be, and then trying to work out what the right system for them is. And Epic Flow offers a whole suite of functionality, which in a lot of cases I think is something that you need to sort of evolve into over time. And I suppose the takeaway from this is that it really does depend on what the needs of the organisation are, and just how complex or simplistic the scenarios that they're looking at resource managing are.
Ben, I know there are only a few. No, there are a lot of project management tools. Really, a lot.
Lots.
I think over 1,000. But if you
Yeah.
look at the multi-project environment, which is really complex and really in a highly dynamic environment, there are only a few. And I think you just have to check, are they able to use in resource allocation competencies, attributes, all this kind of stuff, availability. Is it deterministic scheduling or is it dynamic scheduling and monitoring? You just have to watch those items, and then you have to define your requirements as an organization. Because, Ben, we didn't mention yet, but if you are a small organization, do you need the structure of competencies and attributes? Because a resource manager of 10 people, I think he knows what the competencies already are. Yeah?
It's a good question, because in a lot of cases where you're working maybe in those small, medium enterprises where the role of the resource manager, that may not be a full-time resource manager. Clearly, they may be wearing multiple hats in a small, medium organisation. They more than likely understand the people that they're assigning tasks, and they know what their skills and competencies are. So maybe you don't need to go into as much detail and structure as defining all of this metadata to allow you to make those informed decisions, because actually you already know it. Now that's great in the short to medium term, but if you look at longer term, whether it's succession for that person in role and that local knowledge that may be lost, or if it's a case of you're looking at expansion within the organization and you want to maybe tap into skills and competencies in the wider resource pool left and right, then that's where you would start looking at expanding upon some of that functionality.
Yeah, okay. But basically what you say, if you have a small organization, maybe you don't build up attributes and competencies because the resource managers know, but dynamic scheduling is still an issue. Monitoring is still an issue, even in a small company. Do you agree? In a multi-project setting?
Yeah, I agree to an extent. And if you're looking at it purely through the lens of resource assignment, then yes, local knowledge is incredibly powerful there. And but if you're looking at the impacts of assigning way out into the future, or looking at capacity in, it's another topic in its own right, but capacity and competence. So forget your resource groups and what's the capacity in a certain competence that I have at this point in time. That's something that you wouldn't be able to do within your head locally. So
okay,
there are other applications for
it. Please, Anastasia, next question. Seeing the impact of resource overload, should you allow any resource constraint in your multi-project environment? I love this question. Ben.
Well, in that case, if you love it so much, do you want to lead the way, Jan Willem?
Okay. The question is, no, let's assume me as an organization, I don't want to have any resource constraint. What does that mean? That means probably I can do more with the same resources. So what happens if you have an easy life and people have time enough? I know what will happen, Ben. Ambition goes down, student syndrome comes in, gold plating comes in. I think you have to be ambitious. So maybe it's better that you choose a resource constraint, knowing this is the group, the role that I want to have loaded to the max. Not overloaded, loaded to the max. And the rest not. That would be my view. By the way, this is what I learned from Ellie Goldratt. So it's not the problem that you are the constraining resource within the company, as long you are not overloaded. Because we are a commercial environment in Western Europe, you want to do as much as possible, I can imagine. Yeah, that will be my answer. Do you have something to add, Ben?
I think if you were going to go down that route, it's a case of being open-minded in which resources you do apply a constraint to. So it might not always be the same grouping of resources. It may change over time.
That's true.
And that's something that you need to be aware of if you are going to make that decision and go down that route. Yes.
Therefore, you have this. Therefore, this monitoring is very important.
Continue. Exactly. That look in the rearview mirror that I mentioned earlier on. How have we performed previously?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Anastasia, do we have another? Oh, we still have 5 minutes. Can you give advice of how to introduce resource management in a low maturity organizational environment? I think you have this experience. No, I don't. I'm not sure. The question is, what is low maturity? There's a joke. Let me start with the joke. I was discussing with the client what their maturity level was in project management, and then they asked me, "Is there a level below 0? Because there where we are." So. But okay, let's say low maturity level. I think there are 5 levels. They are on maturity level 1. Can you introduce resource management in such an environment, Ben? Can you answer this question?
Yeah, I think so. So the first place to start is understanding your resource pool and the all of those things that we discussed earlier on, along with what the availability of the resources is. And having a consistent structure within that resource pool, I think, is incredibly important too. The next aspect in terms of then bringing in that demand is clearly key, but it's not an absolute necessity to have great quality project plans from the outset. I think as long as you have an indication as to the amount of demand that is required, or is being demanded, the amount of resource that is being demanded within each individual project, and that can be at high level. It doesn't have to be at whatever your target level of detail is into the future. But if you've got that, it's very quick to actually overlay all of those demand signals on top of each other, combine those with the resource pool availability, and actually start looking at what your underload overload scenario looks like.
Yeah.
The detail within those individual plans, if you want to build that out to as you increase the maturity within the organization, that's something that can happen over time. This isn't something that we just want to flip the switch on overnight. It can happen over many months, even many years in some respects. So I think the important thing is it's all about taking whatever is available and replaying that back, and that's the beginning of the change journey right
there. Okay. I want to finish. Okay, no, it's clear. I'm just communicating with Anastasia. Ben, I was just thinking, introducing resource management like you expressed, maybe not with the competencies and the attributes, but the rest, is a good way to increase your maturity.
Exactly. I think
the second part is, it's always about my estimations are not correct. But if you are monitoring what is happening, you will also increase the quality of your estimation. So it's a way to, let's say, increase your maturity. Okay, Ben, we are at the end. We have 2 minutes left. I really loved this conversation we had. I have a proposal, Ben. Why shall we write an article about the things we discussed today and publish that? Because Albert Ponstein and Elie Schagenheim did the same after their webinar a month ago. So, and we will share, of course, the material, the videos, what we discussed via email to all the subscribers, and it would be great. Ben, thank you very much. I hope soon that we are now not close to each other. I hope we soon meet each other. And we always say with a glass of wine, and then can learn a lot of our clients. Thank you very much for sharing your experience. I really enjoyed it. And I will thank everybody, especially the ones who wrote questions, beautiful questions. I want to thank everybody. And I hope you will join in next webinar, probably within 1 month. Ben, thank you very much.
No, thank you very much.
Bye-bye to everyone.